morning and welcome to Writing for Film and Other Visual Formats. My name is Monica and I'm going to be leading you through this wondrous adventure that is writing. I changed journey to adventure because I want to make it sound more exciting and like you really want to go through this. But anyway, we're here, we're going to do it. We're talking about the structure of your film and a couple of ways to talk about it, to visually show it. And so you can go through and take your screenplay, your script, and put it into this sort of a structural visual representation to be able to understand maybe if you're needing to have other elements that you're missing, if you need more in one place, less in another, that sort of thing. So we're going to talk about the first part of it is going to be the regular happy ending screenplay. Then in tragedies, then we're going to be talking about television, and then we're going to be talking about the verticals, the new verticals that are happening right now. So I'm going to show a graphic here. You can screenshot that if you'd like, but it's what we're going to be talking about. The first thing that happens is you are brought into the film, and we're going to talk about movies first, like I said. You're brought into the film and you're brought into the normal life. You have a character or characters and you figure out what is happening right now and how it's just a normal, this is what happens every day, this is who my character is, that sort of thing going on right now. So that's the normal life. Next, after you get to know the ordinary life, we get to the inciting incident. That's where the character or characters are presented with something that is a call to adventure or call to action. And that's where the characters need to decide, are they going to do this thing, go on the adventure, make the try for a date, do the impossible of defeating the dragon, that sort of thing, the call to adventure, call to action. That is the inciting incident. Now, a character may decide to go on the adventure and the plot ensues, or they may decide they don't want to go on the adventure, they are reluctant, and somehow they are still thrust into the adventure anyway. So that is the inciting incident, and that is basically going to get the rising action started, where things get more exciting, more interesting, more happens. The characters are going to be achieving or trying to achieve goals along the way to get them to what they perceive is their end goal. So what we have here is basically Act 1. Depending on how long your script is, some people will argue that you're say an 120-page script. You're probably 12 to 15 pages maybe, sometimes more, sometimes less, by the time you get to the inciting incident and you get ready for Act 2. So for Act 2, we have a rising action and a falling action. Sometimes the people will talk about it as 2A and 2B, not 2B or not to be, but 2B. So the first part of it being, we've had the call to action, the characters start to work towards the goal. They have obstacles that start coming up, and they are effective or ineffective depending on how the script is going for that. Till the point, the rising action, you get to the high point, the midpoint, the turning point, which is basically halfway through your script for the most part. At this point in time, sometimes characters will find out the original stated goal is not actually what they thought it was going to be, and they have to reassess. Sometimes it looks like the everything is going great, we are chugging along towards our goal, and then suddenly we have an idea that things are not going to go as easily as we thought they were going to go. So that's basically, if we're looking at the top of the pyramid, that's the midpoint, the high point, the turning point. That is the end of 2A. And then we start the slow or sudden decline, where things are starting to go badly. Things look like they're not going to work. If it's a group sort of an endeavor. You're going to lose members of the party. Like things are going badly until you get to the low point. This is going to be the end of Act 2, end of 2B, end of 2. So you're going to get to a point where all is lost, is a lot of times how they refer to it. This is the character is at the all-time low. It looks like the character is never going to win. All is lost. That's the end of Act 2. Okay, so now we're at Act 3. Basically, at the end of Act 2, all is lost. Everybody's deserted things. It looks like you're never going to win. And then the character rebounds. They have a new influx in action. Somebody else comes to help them. The other characters come back and decide to come back to the party. Things are going to go well. They discover a new angle of things. The hope is reborn. So they figure out how they're going to win. They have a strategy. They have obstacles that they're going to overcome. They may have changed their methods. But they are going to defeat the bad guys. They're going to make it to the prom on time. It's the idea that we're coming on to the end of the script, and we're going to have a win. We're going to have a win. So they work together. They solve the problem. They get to the climax. This is going back to high energy, and all is right with the world. All is good. We're meeting the goal. We're defeating the dragon. Everything is good. That's going to be the climax of your script. So it's going to be another little triangle. So everything's going to be okay. That's basically what we're going to do. The rising action is going to bring us to the climax, and then from there they have the denouement, the lovely French term. This is where everything is getting resolved, floating back to a new normal life. It has been changed by the actions of the characters. So you're never going back to normal life exactly. You're going to a new normal through the action of the script. So the denouement can be as short or as long as it needs to be. People complain in the trilogy where you have the Fellowship of the Ring. You get to Return of the King. The denouement is so long. Oh my God, you think it's never going to end. Like everything's resolving, we're happy about that, but it's taking so damn long. That's a very long denouement. Other times it's super quick. They have the prom, things are nice. The guy's got the girl, the girl's got the guy, the guy's got the guy, the girl's got the girl, however it works for you. Everything is all right, and you get the feeling that this new normal is going to be they lived happily ever after the end. So that's basically Act 3, is you have that, from the low point to the climax of the film, the denouement to the normal life. That's Act 3. Now, what if it all ends badly? What if the goal is not met? What if things do not go to plan? What if the person doesn't learn their lesson? How does this work out visually? So basically, you have sort of an inversion of the second, third, and end of the film. So what you want to do is think about things like this. In classical, like Shakespearean or Greek tragedy, tragedy comes about because the main character cannot change. There's some sort of flaw that the character has that makes them not be able to achieve the end goal. So it's like, Oedipus. You're thinking about that sort of a thing. Sometimes in more modern tragedy, it's like the events are just, too hard to get out of. You're not going to win. There's no happy ending for whatever reason. So the structure looks a little different on this. So you have your normal life, and then you have the inciting incident. You have a goal. The characters are going towards it. And what it feels like, you have them meeting their goals, that rather than having the descent to a low point where it feels like all is lost, you don't have that. You have a structure that goes on, and it feels like you've met the goal, you're at a climax, but you're only halfway through the film. So lately what I've been doing is when I'm watching movies, I like to hit the button where I can see where we are time-wise. So if we are, halfway into the film, or 3/4 of the way through, and everything is great. The characters succeeding, like, you know, blue skies, it's going to be fantastic. I get the feeling that maybe I'm in a tragedy. Maybe things are not going to work out. So this has been a really good way for me to make sure that I'm feeling the timing of something, because that's the idea, is you want to get it so ingrained in you that you feel the timing. Is it like we're in the right place at the right time? So we keep going up, like couldn't get much higher. And we're at that point that should be the low point. So what we know is the script is not going to end well, because you can't just go up and up and up and haha, this is a great script, there's nothing going wrong. How could this be? So the idea is that it's going to end poorly. So you have an inversion when you're dealing with a tragedy, when you can look at it and go, oh, okay, so instead of the rise to a climax at the end, I'm going to have a decline to the end. Denouement could be ordinary life without making the goal, but you're really looking at the fact that the low point is moved to the end point when you're talking about that. Now, so that's fairly simple. You can look at that. Any number of tragedies or films where things don't end well. You can look at some biopics where you know characters are going to end up dying. You know, that's the kind of structure that you're going to be looking at for those. What I want to say to take away from this is to know what you're going into beforehand, because that helps you figure out that structure, like where are we at the point where we're the highest, we're the feeling the best and most amazing, and how to, you know, you've telegraphed in some way that things are going to be changing, but that you are bringing them to the end, which is low. And again, like I said, it's the low point because of either it's a tragedy or it's a, you know, they don't make the goals at all in the film, something like that. So be aware that does change the structure of your script and when things happen. So you'll have to be keeping that in mind as well. So that's tragedy. Now let's move on to television. Now in some ways, television is becoming very different. Some television is more like film. Some television has, you know, characters who do change throughout the run of a season. If you're looking at other more, you know, episodic television, that's more, you know, like the comedy or things like that, where you have characters that don't change, that are always the same. They're just put in new, different situations, the situation comedy. When you are doing that, a lot of times people are talking about your writing in 5-act structure. And sometimes they will use a 5-act structure for film, but I don't find it as helpful to think about that. Usually with 5-act structure, I'm thinking about in TV, you have 2 bumpers on the end. This is kind of a more classic. 2 bumpers on the end. There's the idea that television breaks have advertisements, and so the advertisements are going to go in the positions of the act breaks, and so you're automatically writing to those things, the act breaks to the TV breaks. So if you want a very simple example of this, Seinfeld. You had Seinfeld doing a bit at the beginning, was a stand-up routine that had relation to what was going to be going on in the episode. And then you had the 3 acts in the middle, and then another bumper at the end, which is him doing another stand-up routine to kind of tie it all together. So that's the most rudimentary, if you think about it that way. The rest of it, depending on if you're doing drama, if you're doing other things, you're probably going to have the 2 end types, the bumpers, and then the meat of the story is going to be in those 3 acts in the middle. But again, TV is changing a lot when you're talking about, you know, the feeling of it. Where are you watching it? Are you going to be having advertisements, or are you going to have no advertisements? So in that instance, the feel of it is a little more like a film for that case when you're looking at that. Now, the other two things that I want to talk about are verticals, which are very different, and then when you're talking about trilogies coming in where there are multiple pieces of a project. So let's talk about verticals first. With the verticals are a lot like pulp used to be, or newspaper stories that would come out that are basically episodics, but they're spaced out over a certain amount of time. Like you're going to have an episode of something that's going to come out by itself, and it's not a standalone, meaning it's not a one-time deal. It's a piece that is going to want to make you come back for the next one. So some of like the books of like Edgar Rice Burroughs back in the day, they were done this way, where you're just getting one chapter or one story at a time. And so the whole goal was to leave you wanting more, or in a situation where you would tune in next week. There you go. So the story is continuing, so it's a lot like television in that way. But it's just where you just have the one episode and you have to wait, but it's a continuing story over time. Some television is like that, but that's more where it's not going to be a show that is, put on TV and then later on it's going to be reshown on TV, where it doesn't matter where you tune in on the episode because it's just the characters doing things. There's not an evolving plot line. So in this way, the verticals are a lot like the pulp of years past. You're going to be writing an episode for that has some kind of a cliffhanger every episode, or has the thing is like, what's happening next? A question could be raised. It could be you find out something surprising about a character that's going to change everything, or it's possibly that it's an actual cliffhanger where someone's hanging on the edge of the cliff. You have to tune in next time to see if they fall. So with verticals, it's important to think about driving people to the next episode. So your wherever you are in the arc always has to end with that cliffhanger element, or the very thing that's going to bring your viewers back to the next episode. So in verticals or things like that, you're really making something that is part of a longer arc. So it's not supposed to be a standalone. It's part of an arc, a plot arc, but it is one that's like this. Every time you're having a kind of a normal life to a cliffhanger, normal life cliffhanger, normal life cliffhanger, until you get to the last episode, which is going to resolve everything and have the climax and denouement in that episode. So that's really what you're looking at for verticals, is that sort of always the uptick with the drop off until you get the end and you have a resolution. Now the last thing that I want to talk about is when you're looking at trilogies. Usually things are done into trilogies because you can have them match the regular arcs of a script, except for your first episode is the beginning, and then you have something that hasn't been figured out yet. Or it could be that first one looks like it's all finished, but then we get to the second one and it's like, oh, it's not really finished. We missed something. And then it's the low point. The second film is a low point, is left on the low point. And then the third film is the resolution, the climax, from the low point to the climax to the resolution. Excuse me, I need a drink of water. Okay, so say we look at Star Wars. The first film looks complete and whole. It looks like the rebellion has dealt a blow to the Empire that it couldn't possibly, recover from. So we could end there. A lot of things that start out as individual films then later can become trilogies or the first in a number of films. But that first one, sometimes because people don't know that it's going to be part of a more story, sometimes people don't know if they're ever going to get another movie made again, because if it doesn't do well, you're not going to get another film. But excuse me, for whatever reason, you have a film that can be mostly whole if it needs to be. So the first Star Wars, that could have ended it all. That could be it. We could just be like, yay, we got him, huzzah. But as it turns out, we get into 2 and we find out, oh, the Empire is not destroyed. There's still all sorts of things around the universe where the rebels are having to fight the Empire. And the end of the story seems to be the low point. This is all is lost. Luke's hand is lost, literally. You know, basically they've been dealt a horrible blow. Luke's found out that, you know, Darth Vader is his father. Oh, hey. And then you know, Han Solo is now encased in kryptonite, going to Jabba the Hutt. You know, and they're in tatters. They're in tatters. They're alive, but they've been dealt this terrible blow. Come into the 3rd film. This is the reassessment, readjustment. They have to go save Han Solo. They have to get the crowd together again, the team together again, and to start that last climb to how they're going to actually win the whole shebang. So that 3rd film functions as low point to the basically resolution of the overall arc, and then the denouement is the, you know, everybody's celebrating across the galaxy with the defeat of the Empire. The big baddie that we discovered, you know, Darth Vader was not really, you know, the bad guy. The Emperor is really the bad guy, and we have to get him. That's a new, you know, we were on this arc. We figured out that we've, you know, missed the whole goal to begin with. Different goal is there. We defeat the Emperor, and then we have the denouement to the normal life, which is a free galaxy. Yay. So when we have those sorts of things, a lot of times people will be trying to make the book series, the movie series into a trilogy, because it will automatically follow that sort of same functioning structure as a singular movie would, to get to the high point, low point, resolution, and climax. And so that's what they're looking at if they're looking at a trilogy. Now, in case you were interested, like the Star Wars universe, you could go through and figure out which stories are told in which ways. I think the one I've been most interested in is the fact that, like, Andor as a series, the movie came out first, and we know that ends up being a tragedy. That's being the low point, at which then it starts out. The rest of that plot line is going to be how we get back from that low point to win. But the whole series itself, the overall arch, is going to end up into that low point where the movie ends, and we with those characters, and we know that the rest of the rebellion is going to be working. We're going to get back to that high point and that salvation of the galaxy. But that character and that series is basically a tragedy. So we can look at that in the Star Wars universe. So what I'd suggest is take a look, if you're writing a screenplay or a script, where your film falls. How does your action go? You know, and take that structure and figure out which pieces of your work go where, you know, and what type it is. That way, if you're going through and people are going, well, I feel like there's not a point where I'm ever, you know, concerned about if my character is going to win. I just feel like they're getting it really easy, and they just like, huzzah, we're all done. We figured out the puzzles. Wasn't that easy? You could look at that and go, okay, either I need more obstacles or I need a more serious low point. And sometimes, for myself included, what I find is I love my characters. I've taken time to craft them, to get to know them, to think about what they ate for breakfast, all that good stuff. And I don't really want to make it hard for them. I don't. I want them to just have happy things, you know, like it just sunshine and puppies, just really. So what really, for the most part, that I end up needing to do is figure out all the ways in which I'm going to make it really hard for my character, and I'm going to get them legitimately to a low point, something that's believable, something that's understandable, something that has, you know, people crying in the seats to know that we are at the low point. That's really what I want, which means that I have to take the characters that I love and go, all right, well, I guess we're not gonna have that then, and dive into making it harder for them. So I would say for me, the hardest part is to take characters I love and really give them a low point. So anyway, take time figuring out what you're writing. You know, are you in one of these categories, and does it make sense what you've created for your plot, how this is gonna roll out? Anyway, let me know if you have questions, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.